here from Miss Carrie's Creations. Welcome to day 28 of our 31 days of Christmas cards video collab. I hope that you have enjoyed all of the projects our creative design team has been posting this month. Today I'll be sharing my final 31 days of Christmas cards project with you, and to be honest, I debated dividing this tutorial up into two videos, but instead chose to end the month with a full-length Cricut class tutorial for you to enjoy. If you wish to jump through this video tutorial, I have posted links to each section in the description below, along with links to the supplies that I used and links to each one of our creative design team members' channels. So sit back in those comfy creating clothes and get ready for another Christmas card project. Today I want to show you how to use our new rectangle shaker windows with the Cricut Engraving Tool. These shaker windows are designed to go with our stitched rectangle frame thin cuts. Inside the package you have two smaller windows, two medium windows, two large windows, and two sets of foam frames with foam squares in between that you can use on your other projects. On the two cards I'm creating today, I will be engraving the acetate using this engraving tool. The engraving tool is one of the many tools you can use with your maker machine. You use it with this quick swap housing unit. All you need to do is press the plunger button at the top, attach the engraving tool, and we're ready to go. Now let me show you how you can create engraved images in Cricut Design Space. The first thing we want to do is replicate the acetate that we're going to be etching our images on. So I'm going to insert a square shape and I'm going to resize it to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inch high for that medium acetate window. Once I have this image sized, I'm going to pick out some snowflake images that I want to be etched onto that window. So I've just gone into my image library here. I've searched for snow. I've filtered out my purchased images, and here I found a snowflake background that I plan on using. This comes from our Art Philosophy collection. If you'd like to purchase this collection, I will put the link in the description below. I'm going to go ahead and insert that image into my canvas, and then I'm going to resize it so that it's a little bit bigger than the rectangle I have here. Now, as you can see, it's not quite tall enough, and I could try to stretch it, but I really don't want to make all of those snowflakes wonky. So it's going to be much easier to duplicate that background image, rotate it until I have the look that I want, and then once I have all of the snowflakes touching each other, I'm just going to weld these two images together. Now the image is a little bit too long, and I need to make sure that it's the exact same size as my acetate window. So the first thing I need to do real quick is duplicate that square image. Then I'm going to slice the two images on the left, and now I have a snowflake background that is the exact same size as my acetate window. I'm going to go ahead and center this image over that rectangle. Once it is centered, I'm going to change those snowflakes into an etched image. The first thing I need to do is to make sure that my machine is set to my maker machine. I'm going to select that snowflake image. Then I'm going to go up to line type. I'm going to choose engrave. And now I'm going to attach that engraved image onto that rectangle. So now Design Space knows that I need to engrave right onto this rectangle image, which is going to be our acetate. Once I was finished with the acetate portion of this project, I just went in and grabbed a couple more images that I wanted to add to the card. So if you take a look over there on the right in the layers panel, you can see all of the extra images I added along with that attached acetate etched image. Now we're going to go ahead and click Make It. Here we are in Mat Preview, and I just realized that I put the acetate image on the same mat as the two ornaments that are going to be cut out of white cardstock. Instead of going back and changing the material color, I'm just going to go ahead and move this snowflake image to a new mat. I'm going to click on the image. Then I'm going to click the three little dots above it on the left side. I'm going to choose Additional Matte. I'm going to change that color to gray, and then I'm going to go ahead and place that snowflake image on the new mat. Because we are engraving on a piece of acetate, we also need to move the image on this mat. When Cricut cuts out an image, it cuts a 1/4 inch down from the top of the mat and a 1/4 inch from either side. And if we place our acetate right in the upper right-hand corner, it isn't going to engrave properly. So I am just going to drag the image down 1 inch and over 1 inch. And then when we go to place it on the mat, we're going to place it exactly where it shows here in this mat preview. And that way we know that it's going to etch those images in this exact spot where we have placed them on the mat. The next step is to choose acetate for our material. I'm just going to browse all materials, search for acetate, and select that material. I don't need to change the pressure. I can just leave it at default. After we've set the material, you will take a look at the tools that you need. It tells you to load the engraving tip, which is the number 41 tip on your quick swap housing. So now let's go ahead and get that acetate ready to engrave, and let's get our tools loaded into the machine. Our acetate windows have a protective film cover on one of the sides. I'm just going to peel back a little bit of the corner before I place this down on the mat. Now remember, in Mat Preview, we chose to place this 1 inch down from the top and 1 inch over from the left. So I'm going to place my acetate in that exact spot, and then I'm going to peel off that protective cover. Now I'm going to grab that quick swap housing. I'm also going to grab the engraving tool, which is tool number 41, and we're going to load everything into my maker machine. The engraving tool goes right into clamp B on your maker machine. You want to make sure that the little grooves on the tool are lined up with the grooves on the machine before you clamp this shut. Now I just need to load my mat into my machine and then press go. You're going to hear a little bit of a whirring noise as the machine aligns the tool. Once the maker has determined that the proper tool is in place, it will start engraving the acetate. This does take a little bit of time, but once all of those images are etched into the acetate, we can go ahead and unload this from our machine and see all of those beautiful snowflake images that were created. Once the etching is complete, Design Space is going to ask you to load the fine point blade and press the go button once again. Because we added a rectangle image to attach those etched images to, it assumes that we also want to cut out the rectangle. We can go ahead and skip this part because our rectangle's already been cut out. Go ahead and unload your mat, and let's take a look at that acetate. As I peel this acetate off the mat and bring it into the light, you're going to be able to see all of those etched snowflake images. Now, one side of the etched image is really rough, the other is smooth. So when you go to put this down onto your project, you're going to want to pay attention that the smooth side is up. I just want to admire this etching a little bit longer. I love how subtle it is. It's going to look beautiful on the front of our shaker card. Now that you know how to create this etched acetate, let's start assembling our shaker card. Here we have everything we need to assemble the shaker card. We have the ornament cut out of pearl paper, the sentiment cut out of scarlet cardstock, the leaves have been cut out of evergreen cardstock, our frame and our background have also been cut out of that beautiful pearl paper. We also have that etched acetate that we made and a card base. I'm going to start by placing that pearl paper down onto the front of the card base. This is going to be the background for our shaker. The next step is to attach that acetate onto the foam frame. My friend Jama taught me this wonderful trick. You attach the acetate to the foam frame while it's still on the backing sheet. This prevents it from getting out of shape. Now remember, you want to make sure that the rough side goes down so that the smooth side of that etched acetate is on the front of the card. After we have placed this down onto that foam frame, we're going to glue down that pearl paper stitched rectangle right down onto the acetate. While that dries, we're going to prep the front of the card to add some beads and glitter. I've got my anti-static pouch, and I'm just adding a little bit of anti-static powder to the front of the card. Then I'm going to dump down a single layer of white bitty beads, and then I'm going to add a little bit of white glitter. Now you can choose to add any item that you want to the inside of your card. These are just the two that I've chosen so that it looks just like snow. Now I'm just going to peel that frame off in one big piece. Don't you just love how it isn't misshapen? It's a perfect rectangle. Then I'm going to add a little bit of anti-static powder onto the acetate, and I'm going to place this down right onto the front of the card. Once that's in place, we can go ahead and decorate the front of the card with those die cuts. I've cut 2 of the sentiments out of scarlet so that I can layer them on top of each other so that I have a little bit of a thicker die cut for the front of my card. I'm going to glue these 2 images together, and then I'm going to add the green holly leaves over on the left side. The other 2 holly images are going to layer behind this sentiment, and all of this is going to sit on top of that ornament. At this point in the project, I was really questioning whether or not I wanted to use that ornament. I thought that adding a bow to the top of the ornament might help, so I used our bow thin cut and I cut a little bow out of scarlet glitter paper. After assembling the bow and adding it to the top of the ornament, I just felt like it was hiding too much of those etched snowflake images I spent so long creating. So I decided to remove the ornament, keep the bow, and keep the sentiment, and continue to create the card without the ornament. I'll plan on using this on a project later on. Off camera, I cut the tails out of matching scarlet glitter paper. This little tab is the band that wraps around the front of the bow, but since glitter paper is white on the back, I'm just going to cut it off. If you wanted, you could wrap this band around the bow separately, but I plan on using a little element on the front of my bow, so I'm just going to go ahead and leave it off. Now that the bow's assembled, I can add all of the sentiment images to the front of my card. Here I'm just adding some little bits of foam tape onto the back of that sentiment, and then I'm going to place it along with all of those layers of leaves and pine boughs onto the front of the acetate. I've grabbed some carnation red liquid pearls, and I'm going to add some berries onto some of those pine boughs. Now this is the very first time I have ever used liquid pearls. I was a bit intimidated because I've been told that they are difficult to use and they take a long time to dry. After a little bit of practice, I figured them out, and I actually love the way they look, and they didn't take as long to dry as I thought they would. In the center of my bow, I'm adding a white pearl. These are self-adhesive, but because this is glitter paper, I've decided to add a little dot of glue to help this pearl stay in place. Off camera, I've cut a few more of those evergreen pine boughs and layered them behind the sentiment. I really like the way this stands out on top of all of that etched acetate. I'm so glad that I decided not to use the ornament. Instead, I allowed all of that etching to show through. Now all I have to do is glue that finished bow to the top of the card, and this first etched shaker card is complete. Now this card just turned out simply stunning. I honestly wish you could see all of the etching in detail on camera. I'm sure your head is swimming with ideas from all the techniques you just learned, and I honestly thought of just calling it quits at this point. But I wanted to end the month with a bang, so I've decided to show you how to make another etched shaker card. So here we are back in Cricut Design Space creating another etched image. This time our piece of acetate is 3 inches wide by 4 inches high, but the actual etched portion of the card is only 1 3/4 inches wide by 3 inches high. So right now I am centering these two images so that I can create a template to place my etched images on. I'm just going to grab a few snowflake images from our You Are Here collection. I'm also going to grab this little snowmobile because I want the snowflake on the snowmobile. Now, I always like to tell my Cricut students that our images always have more to them than you can see, especially if you use that contour key. So even though that snowflake is actually a cutout on the snowmobile, I can use the contour key to select the snowflake image only. And now I have an additional image in that You Are Here collection that I didn't even know I had before, just because I used that contour key. All right, so at this point, I am just arranging all of the snowflake images over the portion of the acetate that's going to be etched. Once I have chosen where all those images are going to be, I'm going to do exactly what I did on the last card and change all of those snowflakes to etched images. Now I can go ahead and delete that center rectangle. We do not need it. It was just there as a placeholder to help us form our template. I can go ahead and attach all of those snowflakes onto that piece of acetate, and we're ready to engrave. So I've decided to add an extra bit of fun to this card. Those of you who don't own a maker but wanted to be able to make these, I've decided to add a little element just for you. We're going to be using the Cricut Foil Transfer Tool on this portion of the card. This tool can be used with both Explore and Maker machines. I've already created my frame and I've replicated my snowflake images. This time I'm going to change the line type to foil. There's a fine, a medium, or a bold option. I've chosen to use the fine option for all of my snowflakes. Next to line type, there's the little ink blot box. This is normally where we choose our material color. When you are foiling an image, you choose the foil color here. I've chosen to use silver for all of my snowflakes. Now, once I've changed all of the line type on these images and I've changed the foil color on all of the images, all I have to do is replicate them and resize them until I have filled the entire frame with snowflakes. Now that I have all of these images where I want them to be, all I need to do is select the frame and all of those snowflake images and attach them together. Just like with the first project, we need to go into Mat Preview and move our images onto the mat so that all of the engraving and foiling is exactly where we want it to be. Since our first project had engraving, we are going to focus on the foil tool with this project. So I've selected that second mat. I'm going to go ahead and select medium cardstock. And as you can see, it's telling me that I need to load my foil transfer tool and I need to tape my silver foil tape onto the base. So let's take a look at what that means. I'm going to be adding the foil images onto this piece of pearl paper. This is left over from when we cut out the stitched frame on the other card, and I didn't want any of that pearl paper to go to waste. I've placed it onto my mat exactly how I had it placed in Mat Preview, 2 inches from the top and 1 inch from the left. I'm going to go ahead and use some Post-it tape just to make sure this is nice and stuck down onto my mat. I've grabbed a package of foil transfer sheets. Here we have a piece of silver. When we take a look at it, the front side is shiny and the back side is matte. It's the matte side that's going to go down on your project. If your project is smaller than the foil sheet, you're going to want to trim down that foil sheet. Otherwise, you're going to end up with foil stuck onto your mat, and you would hate to waste a good piece of foil. Inside the pack of foil transfer sheets are some little bits of tape. These are used to secure the foil in place. You're going to want to make sure that it's nice and tight on top of your project. Like I said, the Cricut Foil Transfer Tool can be used in an Explorer or Maker machine. There are 3 tips, a fine, a bold, and a medium. Each one of these has a set of lines. The fine has a single, medium 2, and bold 3. We are using the fine tip today, so I'm going to go ahead and load this into the Foil Transfer Tool, and then we're going to load it into my Maker machine. This goes right into clamp B, just like your fine tip blade. Once that is clamped into place, we can load our mat and press go. This works a lot like other foil transfer systems, but there is no heat required. The pressure from that foil transfer tool engraves all of that foil onto your project. And once all of that etching is complete, we can go ahead and unload our mat, remove the foil, and then we can cut out any of the images we need to cut on this piece of cardstock. So here is that piece of pearl paper with all of the snowflakes foiled onto the top. This is before we cut out that center rectangle. I'm going to have to place it back onto the mat to cut out the center, but let's just take a look at all of that gorgeous foiling. This is definitely something I plan on doing again with this specialty paper. All right, so now it's time to go ahead and put together that second card. Here we have that etched piece of acetate with the snowflakes. We have that frame with the foiled snowflakes. We have a piece of white daisy cardstock, a piece of bluebell glitter paper, and a card base. We're going to start by adding that acetate onto the rectangle foam frame, just like we did in the first project. Once again, you want to make sure that that rough side goes down onto that foam frame. Once the acetate is attached to the foam, we're going to pull that frame up off of the backing, and then we're going to glue down that foiled frame onto the acetate. After adding a little bit of anti-static powder on that acetate, we're going to pour in some bluebell sequins and some white bitty beads, and then we're going to place down that white daisy cardstock over that foam frame. This forms the shaker portion of our snowflake card. Now we're going to adhere down the bluebell glitter paper onto the card base. Then we're going to adhere this shaker piece down onto the glitter cardstock. I've already stamped the sentiment with sapphire ink on bluebell cardstock. I'm also going to be adding a white poinsettia onto the front of the card. I've used the thin cuts from this Comfort and Joy stamp set to cut out my pieces from pearl paper and vellum. I've also used the stamen portion of our large flower to cut out the center of my poinsettia from pearl paper. The center of this flower is created by rolling up that floral die cut. Once it's been rolled, I'm just going to adhere the ends closed, hold it for a few seconds until it dries, and then just set it aside. Now all I have to do is layer up each one of those poinsettia die cuts using a little bit of foam tape. I'm going to roll a few of the petals as I go, and then once that poinsettia is all complete, I'm just going to use a little bit of liquid glass to add the center of the flower. Once the adhesive dries, I can spread apart the center of that flower, and then I'm just going to grab a piece of foam tape and add it to the front of the card. Once the flower's in place, I'm just going to add a little bit of foam tape onto the sentiment and then tuck it under the flower and place it on the right side of the card. The last addition to this card are a couple of bluebell glitter gems. These match the glitter paper and the sequins inside the shaker, and they just add a little bit of elegance onto the front of the card. And now our etched shaker cards are complete. We were able to take these shaker window acetate windows and etch them with that etching tool on our Cricut Maker. If you take a look at this up close, you can see all of the little detailed etching. I honestly wish you could see this in person because it is just simply stunning. By using that etching tool, we were able to add some beautiful details to the front of this shaker card. I also used the etching tool to add a couple of snowflake images on the window of this shaker card, and we used the new foil tool to add even more detail to that pearl paper. Both of these cards took advantage of some of the new tools that you can use on your Cricut machine. I hope that you enjoyed all of the tips and tricks that I shared with you today as we created these cards. I want to thank you for joining me today for my final 31 days of Christmas card project. I hope that you learned a few new things that you plan on using on your future Christmas card creations. Now, we aren't quite finished with our video collab for the month. There are still a few more videos that will be posted by other members of the creative design team, so make sure that you're subscribed to their channels so that you don't miss out on any of those videos. If you missed any of our 31 days of Christmas card videos, you can click on that playlist above. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I can't wait to see what you create.